The truth hidden behind a smile. Jungkook. Jimin's voice echoed through the empty hospital corridor as the automatic doors slid open with a cold metallic sound. The rain outside hammered against the glass windows, turning the city lights into blurred streaks of gold and blue. His chest rose and fell violently, his heart pounding harder with every step. Nobody had answered his calls. Nobody had explained why Jungkook suddenly disappeared after practice. And now, standing at the end of the hallway, Jimin saw something that made his entire world stop. Inside a quiet treatment room under the pale white lights, Jungkook lay on the hospital bed. His eyes were closed. An IV line was attached to his arm. The boy who always laughed the loudest, who always insisted he was stronger than anyone else, looked unbelievably fragile. Jimin's breathing caught in his throat. For several seconds he couldn't move. The antiseptic scent filled the air. The soft beeping of medical monitors sounded louder than thunder, and all he could think was one terrifying question. Was Jungkook here? His trembling hand slowly pushed the door open. The sound was enough. Jungkook opened his eyes. Those familiar dark eyes met Jimin's. For a brief moment, surprise flashed across his face, then came guilt. "Hyung." His voice was barely a whisper. Jimin felt tears immediately gathering. "Why?" No answer. Jimin stepped closer. His hands shook uncontrollably. "Why did you tell me?" The words escaped him like broken glass. Jungkook looked away. The silence hurt more than anything. Outside, rain continued pouring over Seoul. Inside that small room, Jimin felt his heart breaking. For months, something had been wrong. He remembered it now, the moments he ignored, the small signs hidden behind Jungkook's bright smiles, the exhaustion after performances, the countless cups of coffee, the excuses about not sleeping well. The times Jungkook quietly held his side when nobody was watching. Jimin had noticed, but Jungkook always laughed. "Fine, Hyung." Those 3 words, always those 3 words, and Jimin wanted to believe them, because believing was easier than imagining this. He reached the bedside. The younger man's face looked pale under the fluorescent lights. The usual spark in his eyes was missing. Jimin sat down slowly. "Long." Jungkook remained silent. "Tell me." A long breath escaped Jungkook's lips. "A few months." Answer shattered something inside him. "A few months." Jimin's voice cracked. "Few months, and you never told me." Jungkook's fingers tightened around the blanket. "I didn't want anyone to worry." The sentence was spoken softly as if it explained everything, but to Jimin it explained nothing. His tears finally fell one after another. "Do you know how worried I am right now?" Jungkook closed his eyes. "I know." "No." Jimin shook his head. "You don't know." The years they spent together flashed before him. The sleepless nights, the dreams they built, the promises they made. They had promised each other something very simple. No matter what happened, they would never face pain alone. And yet Jungkook had chosen silence. He had chosen loneliness. The realization hurt more than anger ever could. The room became impossibly quiet. Only the machines continued their rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Jungkook slowly turned his head. "I'm sorry." Jimin laughed bitterly through tears. "Sorry." His voice trembled. "Do you think saying sorry is enough?" Jungkook stared at the ceiling. The truth was he had prepared for this moment. The disappointment, the sadness, the questions, but he wasn't prepared for Jimin crying. Not like this, not because of him. All his life, Jungkook had learned one lesson: be strong, protect everyone, handle things alone. Weakness was something to hide. Pain was something to endure quietly. Even now, lying in a treatment room with doctors coming and going, a part of him still believed keeping secrets was kindness. But seeing Jimin's tears made him question everything. Maybe silence wasn't protection. Maybe silence was another kind of wound. The door opened quietly. A doctor stepped inside. He noticed Jimin immediately. "You must be family." Jimin stood up. I'm his member." Doctor smiled gently. "He's stable now." Stable. The word offered relief, but not enough. Jimin looked at Jungkook again. Stable from what? Jungkook lowered his eyes. The doctor hesitated, then looked toward his patient. Jungkook gave a small nod. Permission. "He collapsed due to extreme exhaustion and stress," the doctor explained. "He has been experiencing symptoms for several months, but he delayed treatment." Jimin froze. "Delayed treatment, intentionally," the doctor continued. "He pushed himself beyond healthy limits." Every sentence felt heavier than the last. The doctor eventually left, leaving them alone once more. Rain still danced against the windows. Jimin sat down again, this time closer, very close. The anger inside him slowly transformed into something else, because he realized how close he had come to losing someone precious without even knowing. His voice softened. "Were you scared?" Jungkook remained silent for a while, then, finally, "Yes." Answer was almost inaudible. Jimin looked at him. Jungkook rarely admitted fear, rarely admitted weakness. Yet there it was, raw and honest. "I was scared," Jungkook repeated. "Scared that everyone would worry. Scared that I'd become a burden." Confession felt heavier than the rain outside. Jimin reached forward. His hand gently covered Jungkook's, warm, familiar, real. "An idiot." Jungkook chuckled weakly. "Probably." Jimin squeezed his hand. "But you're our idiot." A small smile appeared, the first genuine smile that evening. Tears continued rolling down Jimin's cheeks, yet his voice remained firm. "You never have to carry everything alone." Jungkook looked at him. Those words settled somewhere deep inside his heart. For years, he had believed strength meant enduring pain in silence. Maybe he had been wrong. Maybe true strength was trusting the people who loved him. The storm outside gradually weakened. The city lights became clearer. Jimin pulled his chair closer to the bed. "I'm staying." "You don't have to." "I'm staying." Jungkook sighed, stubborn, the same old Jimin. The same person who always refused to leave. And for the first time in months, Jungkook felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Relief. The weight on his shoulders became lighter, not gone, but lighter. The silence between them no longer felt lonely. It felt safe, comfortable. Home. Hours passed, neither spoke much. They simply remained there together, because sometimes love wasn't found in grand declarations. Sometimes it existed in shared silence, in tears that asked questions words couldn't. In hands that refused to let go. And in the painful realization that no burden was ever meant to be carried alone. That night, beneath the hospital's pale lights and the fading sound of rain, Jimin made himself a quiet promise. No more hidden pain, no more lonely battles, no matter how difficult the road ahead might become. Jungkook would never walk it by himself again. The weight Jungkook carried alone. Morning sunlight slowly replaced the storm, but the warmth of dawn could not erase the heaviness that remained inside Jimin's heart. The hospital room was quiet. Only the soft humming of the air conditioner and the distant footsteps of nurses moving through the corridor filled the silence. Jimin had not slept. He sat beside Jungkook's bed all night, his arms folded on the edge of the mattress, watching over him as if looking away for even a second would make him disappear. Jungkook finally opened his eyes. The sunlight touched his face gently. For a moment he looked peaceful, then reality returned. His gaze fell upon Jimin, still there, still watching, still refusing to leave. A small smile appeared on Jungkook's lips. "Hyung, did you stay here the entire night?" Jimin lifted his head. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. "Obviously, you should have gone home." "Leave you alone?" Jimin shook his head. "A chance." Younger man sighed, the same stubbornness, the same unwavering loyalty. It was one of the reasons Jungkook loved his members so much, and one of the reasons he hid everything from them, because he knew exactly how deeply they cared. A nurse entered the room, checking the monitors before smiling. "Good morning." Jungkook greeted her quietly. She adjusted his Roman 4. "The doctor said you'll need a few more days of observation." Jimin immediately looked up. "A few days," the nurse nodded. "His body is severely exhausted." The word struck Jimin harder than he expected. Exhausted, not tired, not overworked, exhausted. There was a frightening finality in that word. After she left, silence returned. Jungkook avoided Jimin's eyes. He knew what was coming, the questions, the disappointment, the hurt, and honestly, he deserved all of it. Jimin stood near the window. The city below was already awake. Cars moved through busy streets. People hurried toward their destinations. The world continued as if nothing had happened. Yet for him, everything had changed. Without turning around, he spoke. "When did you stop sleeping properly?" Jungkook remained quiet. "Jungkook." Older man's voice was softer this time. "Please." A long breath escaped. "About 4 months ago." Jimin slowly closed his eyes. 4 months, 4 entire months. He remembered it now. The late-night messages, the practice sessions that extended long after everyone else had gone home, the energy drinks, the fake smiles. Jungkook had been drowning while pretending to swim, and nobody realized, or perhaps nobody wanted to realize, because Jungkook had always been the strong one, the golden Maknae, the person everyone believed could endure anything. The expectations placed upon him had become invisible chains. Jimin turned back toward him. "Were you trying to prove something?" Jungkook stared at the blanket. "No." Another pause, then maybe. Honesty surprised both of them. Jungkook swallowed. "Just," his voice became quieter. "I didn't want to disappoint anyone." Jimin walked closer. "Disappoint who?" The younger man looked away. "Everyone." Answer broke something inside Jimin, because he understood far too well the pressure, the fear of becoming less than what people expected, the desperate need to keep smiling even when everything hurt. Artists lived under impossible standards, strong, perfect, reliable, and Jungkook had spent years carrying those expectations on his shoulders. Alone, Jimin sat beside him. "No one asked you to destroy yourself." Jungkook laughed weakly. "I know." "Then why?" His fingers tightened around the sheets. "Because if I stopped." The sentence died halfway. Jimin waited. Eventually, Jungkook finished it. "I thought people would realize I'm not as strong as they think." Room fell silent. A truth long buried beneath years of smiles had finally emerged. Jimin felt tears gathering again, not from anger, not from shock, but from understanding. He had experienced similar fears himself, the fear of being left behind, the fear of not being enough, the fear that love depended on perfection. Human beings carried invisible wounds, and sometimes the people who smiled brightest carried the deepest scars. Jimin reached out, his hand rested gently on Jungkook's shoulder. "Listen to me." Jungkook looked at him. "If you're hurting," his voice trembled. "If you're scared." Another breath. "If you're exhausted." Tears formed in Jimin's eyes. "You tell us." Younger man's expression softened. "You tell me." His words filled the quiet room. "Do you understand?" Jungkook remained still. The warmth of that simple promise spread through his chest. For years he had convinced himself that silence was kindness, that protecting others meant suffering alone, but Jimin's tears last night, and his words now. made that belief seem foolish. The door suddenly opened. Familiar voices filled the room. Rushed inside first. Behind him came Namjoon, Jin, Yoongi, Hosok, and the others. The atmosphere changed instantly. Warmth replaced loneliness. Jungkook's eyes widened. Hyung's. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The sight before them was enough. The hospital bed, the pale face, the exhaustion hidden for months. Jin was the first to move. He gently touched Jungkook's hair. You scared us. No anger, no accusations. Only concern, pure and unconditional. Namjoon stood quietly. His expression carried disappointment, but not the kind Jungkook feared. It was disappointment that someone he loved had suffered in silence. Why didn't you tell us? Namjoon asked softly. The question pierced deeper than any shouting could. Jungkook lowered his head. I didn't want to burden everyone. Yoongi sighed. Idiot. The word was blunt, yet affectionate. You think caring about you is a burden. Hosok sat near the bed. We're family. Taehyung's eyes had already turned red. You really thought we'd rather not know? The room became heavy with emotion. Jungkook looked at every face around him. People who had shared years of dreams and struggles. People who stayed. People who loved him regardless of weakness. His chest tightened, and suddenly, he realized how lonely he had made himself, not because nobody cared, but because he never allowed anyone close enough to help. Tears quietly gathered in his eyes. First genuine tears he had shown in months. Jimin noticed immediately. Without hesitation, he moved closer. Nobody laughed, nobody judged. The room simply became a safe place for honesty. Jungkook covered his face. I'm sorry, his voice cracked. I was afraid. Confession hung in the air, raw, human, real. Namjoon smiled gently. We're all afraid sometimes. Jin nodded. That's why we have each other. Taehyung grabbed Jungkook's hand. And next time if something hurts, we are suffering together, Hosok finished. The room filled with soft laughter. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, warmth returned to Jungkook's heart. Perhaps strength was never about enduring pain alone. Perhaps strength was trusting others enough to let them see your scars. Hours later, after everyone left to give him some rest, only Jimin remained. The afternoon sun painted golden patterns across the floor. Jungkook looked toward him. Hyung. You, Jimin smiled. What, for finding me? Older man became quiet, then he gently squeezed Jungkook's hand. I'll always find you. And for the first time in a very long time, Jungkook believed him. The walls he had built around himself were beginning to crumble, not through force, not through pain, but through love that refused to leave, even after discovering all the hidden darkness within.
The secret behind Jungkook's smiles the third night at the hospital was strangely peaceful. The rain had stopped. Moonlight poured through the large windows, painting silver patterns across the quiet room. Jungkook sat upright on the bed, unable to sleep. The city beyond the glass glittered like countless stars scattered upon the earth, but his thoughts remained trapped somewhere far away. Jimin noticed immediately. He had learned long ago that Jungkook's silence always meant something. Still thinking, Jungkook smiled faintly. A little. Jimin placed his book aside. The room smelled faintly of warm tea and medicine. Everything felt calm, yet something restless remained in Jungkook's eyes. It was the kind of sadness that had existed long before the hospital, the kind that exhaustion alone could never explain. Jimin moved his chair closer. You don't have to pretend anymore. Younger man looked down. I know. But knowing and doing were completely different things. For years, smiling had become instinct, a shield, a habit. A role he performed so naturally that sometimes even he forgot where the real Jungkook ended and the smiling version began. People loved his energy, his confidence, his strength, and he feared that showing weakness would destroy the image everyone believed in. Jimin studied his expression carefully. There is something else, isn't there? Silence. The question hung between them. Jungkook's fingers tightened around the blanket. The moonlight reflected softly in his eyes. Finally, he spoke. You ever feel like no matter how much you do, it's never enough? Jimin's heart softened. The words were painfully familiar. Jungkook continued. When people expect great things from you, his voice was quiet. You start believing that making mistakes isn't allowed. Room remained perfectly still. The beeping monitors sounded distant now, almost unimportant. I used to think that if I worked harder, practiced longer, smiled brighter, he forced a small laugh, then everyone around me would stay happy. Jimin listened carefully, no interruptions, no advice, just listening because sometimes people didn't need solutions, they needed someone willing to hear the truth. Jungkook stared at his own hands, but somewhere along the way, his voice cracked, forgot how to stop. Confession felt heavier than anything he had said before. The endless expectations, the constant pressure, the invisible fear of failure, they had slowly become part of him. And because he feared disappointing others, he had sacrificed himself instead. Jimin looked toward the moonlit window. He understood more than Jungkook realized. There had been nights when he questioned himself too, moments when applause and success failed to silence insecurities hidden deep inside his heart. People often assumed that those who stood on stage lived without fear. The truth was far more complicated. Sometimes, the brightest lights created the darkest shadows. Jimin reached forward. "You know what I think?" Jungkook looked at him. "Think you've spent too many years trying to become everyone's source of strength." A gentle smile appeared. "But nobody told you that strong people need support too." Jungkook's eyes trembled. The words touched a wound he had kept hidden for years, because he remembered being younger before expectations. Before responsibility felt so heavy. Back then, he laughed without worrying, he rested without guilt. He trusted others enough to show weakness. Somewhere along the journey, that version of himself had quietly disappeared, and he missed him more than anyone knew. The hospital door opened softly. A nurse entered with warm tea. She placed 2 cups on the table and smiled kindly. "You both should rest." Jimin chuckled. "We'll try." Nurse looked at Jungkook. Recovery isn't only about the body. Her voice carried the wisdom of someone who had seen many people suffer. Sometimes the heart needs more healing than anything else. After she left, silence returned. But her words remained. Jungkook stared at the cup of tea. Steam rose gently into the air. "Do you think people will see me differently?" Jimin frowned. "For being sick?" The younger man nodded. "For being weak?" Answer came immediately. "No." Absolute certainty, no hesitation. Jungkook blinked. Jimin leaned closer. "People who truly love you won't leave because you need help." His expression softened. "Stay because you finally allowed them to be part of your pain." A quiet emotion settled over the room. The fear Jungkook carried for so long suddenly seemed smaller, not gone, but manageable, because he wasn't facing it alone anymore. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher. The city grew quieter. Jimin eventually noticed something strange. A small notebook sat inside Jungkook's bag near the window, old, worn, the corners slightly bent. He pointed toward it. "What's that?" Jungkook immediately froze. His reaction was unusual, too quick, too nervous. Jimin raised an eyebrow. Faint blush appeared. "It's nothing." "Jungkook." Older man's smile widened. "That means it's definitely something." Younger man sighed. Defeat was inevitable. Slowly, he handed over the notebook. Jimin opened it carefully. His expression changed. Every page contained handwritten thoughts, short entries, personal reflections, dreams, fears, questions he never shared with anyone. One sentence caught his attention. "What happens if the version people love isn't the real me?" Jimin's heart ached. Another page. "I want to rest, but I feel guilty whenever I stop." Another. "Sometimes I smile because I don't know how to explain what's wrong." The room became completely silent. The cheerful Jungkook everyone knew, the confident performer, the strong younger brother. Behind those smiles existed someone fighting battles nobody noticed. Jimin closed the notebook gently. Tears filled his eyes once more. Not tears of sadness alone, but of understanding. How lonely must those nights have been? How many times had Jungkook written these thoughts instead of speaking them aloud? The realization was painful, yet beautiful in its own way, because now, the truth finally existed outside those pages. Jungkook looked embarrassed. "Never wanted anyone to read that." Jimin smiled softly. "Thank you for letting me." Younger man remained quiet. The fear he expected never came. No judgment, no disappointment, only acceptance. For perhaps the first time in years, someone had seen the parts of him hidden beneath endless smiles, and stayed. The moonlight continued pouring into the room. Warm tea slowly cooled on the table. The distance between two hearts quietly disappeared, not because every wound had healed, but because honesty had finally replaced silence. That night, Jungkook understood something he had forgotten long ago. People who truly care about you don't love only your strength. They love your fears, your imperfections, your tired moments, and even the pieces of yourself you believe are too broken to show the world. For the first time in months, he closed his eyes without pretending everything was okay. And somehow that honesty felt more peaceful than any smile he had ever worn. The following morning arrived quietly. Golden sunlight spilled across the hospital room, replacing the silver glow of the previous night. The city outside had returned to its usual rhythm, but inside the small space, time seemed to move more slowly. Jungkook was already awake. The notebook remained on the table beside him. For years, those pages had been his only place of honesty, every fear, every doubt, every lonely thought that never found its way into words. Now Jimin knew. And strangely enough, the world had not fallen apart. The door opened softly. Jimin entered with 2 cups of warm coffee and a small paper bag filled with breakfast. The moment their eyes met, Jungkook smiled. A real smile, not one carefully practiced for cameras, not one created to reassure everyone around him, just a simple, genuine smile. Jimin noticed immediately. His heart felt lighter. Good morning. Morning, Hyung. Jimin placed the food on the table. I brought your favorite. Jungkook looked inside the bag. A small laugh escaped him. You still remember, of course. Older man sat down. Remember everything. Sentence was simple, yet it carried years of shared memories, years of growing together, years of understanding one another without needing explanations. Jungkook lowered his eyes. The warmth inside his chest felt unfamiliar, comfortable, safe. They ate quietly. No heavy conversations. No difficult questions. Just the peaceful presence of someone who refused to leave. After breakfast, Jimin looked toward the notebook. I kept thinking about what you wrote. Jungkook became still. A moment of silence passed. Then Jimin continued. The part where you wondered if people would still love the real you. Younger man looked away. The insecurity had lived inside him for so long that it almost felt normal. Jimin folded his arms. You know, I think everyone has a version of themselves they hide. Jungkook listened carefully. Version, cheerful version. The version that never cries. A gentle smile appeared on Jimin's face. But none of those versions are completely real. Room remained silent. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner filled the space. I used to think I always had to make people happy, Jimin admitted. I thought if I wasn't smiling, then I was failing somehow. Jungkook blinked. Jimin rarely spoke about his own fears. The older man looked outside the window. There were nights when I felt exhausted too. His voice was calm. But I kept pretending because I didn't want anyone to worry. A soft laugh followed. Looks like we're both terrible at asking for help. Jungkook couldn't help smiling. Maybe. Definitely. Atmosphere grew lighter. For the first time in days, laughter returned naturally. It was small, quiet, but real. A few hours later, Namjoon and Taehyung arrived. They carried bags filled with snacks and flowers. The moment Taehyung entered, his dramatic voice filled the room. Precious Maknae looks more alive today. Jungkook laughed. I was never dead. Emotionally, perhaps. Namjoon shook his head. The room instantly became warmer. The heavy emotions of previous days slowly transformed into something gentler, something closer to healing. Taehyung sat beside the bed. You know, everyone has been worried. Jungkook's smile faded slightly. I'm sorry. Namjoon immediately interrupted. No more apologies. The leader's voice was firm yet kind. We're not here to make you feel guilty. He placed the flowers near the window. We're here because we love you. The words settled deeply, simple, honest, unconditional. Jungkook looked down at his hands. All this time he had feared becoming a burden. Yet nobody treated him like one. Nobody complained. Nobody blamed him. Instead, they came with food, with flowers, with terrible jokes, with affection that expected nothing in return. It made his chest ache in the most beautiful way. The afternoon passed peacefully. Stories filled the room. Old memories. Funny moments from years ago, embarrassing incidents nobody would ever forget. Laughter echoed against the hospital walls. For a little while, everything felt normal again. Later, after everyone left, the doctor arrived for another examination. His expression was reassuring. Your condition is improving. Jimin immediately looked relieved. Really? The doctor nodded. Physically, yes. Then his tone softened. But recovery isn't only physical. Jungkook listened carefully. Carried stress for a long time. Doctor adjusted his glasses. Body eventually tells the truth that the mind tries to ignore. Sentence lingered in the air. Jungkook understood its meaning. Every sleepless night, every hidden pain, every forced smile, the body remembered everything. The doctor continued. When you leave this place, things must change. No arguments, no hesitation, a simple truth. After he left, silence returned once more. Jungkook stared at the sunlight dancing across the floor. I don't know how to stop. Confession came unexpectedly. Jimin turned toward him. What do you mean? Been running for so long. Jungkook's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know what happens if I slow down. Fear lingered behind those words, the fear of losing purpose, the fear of becoming unnecessary, the fear that rest itself was a kind of failure. Jimin thought carefully, then he smiled. Maybe stopping isn't the same as giving up. Jungkook looked at him. Maybe resting is just another way of moving forward. Younger man remained quiet. The idea felt unfamiliar, Yet comforting, Jimin leaned back in his chair. You know what I think? What? I think you've spent years taking care of everyone else. His expression softened. Now it's our turn. Room fell silent again, but it was no longer the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of understanding. Evening slowly arrived. The sky transformed into shades of orange and pink. Jungkook watched the sunset from his bed, the colors reflected in his eyes, beautiful. Temporary, peaceful. He suddenly remembered something from childhood. His mother once told him that sunsets existed to remind people that endings could also be beautiful. At the time, he never understood. Now perhaps he finally did. Maybe this exhaustion was not the end of who he was. Maybe it was simply the end of carrying everything alone. A new beginning hidden inside a difficult moment. Jimin noticed the thoughtful expression on his face. What are you thinking about? Jungkook smiled. The answer came softly, thinking that maybe. He paused. Maybe I don't have to be strong every single day. Jimin's eyes warmed. No, a gentle silence followed. Don't. The last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the city skyline. Night gradually embraced the world once again. And for the first time in years, Jungkook allowed himself to believe that vulnerability was not weakness. It was trust. It was courage. And perhaps, more than anything else, it was proof that even the strongest hearts deserve a place to rest.
Morning arrived with the soft sound of birds somewhere beyond the hospital garden. For the first time since being admitted, Jungkook slept through the entire night. No restless turning, no sudden awakenings, no thoughts running endlessly through his mind. When he opened his eyes, the sunlight already filled the room, warm and gentle against the white walls. Jimin was asleep on the small couch nearby. A blanket covered his shoulders. One of his hands still rested on the armrest facing Jungkook's bed, as if even in sleep, he wanted to make sure the younger man was there. Jungkook stared at him quietly. A strange emotion settled in his chest. Gratitude. The kind that was too deep to explain with simple words. For years, he had convinced himself that keeping pain hidden was an act of love. He thought protecting people meant never allowing them to see him at his worst. Yet Jimin had witnessed every vulnerable moment these past few days and had not stepped away even once. Instead, he had stayed. Jungkook smiled faintly. The door opened carefully. Namjoon entered first, carrying a paper bag filled with breakfast. He stopped when he noticed Jimin sleeping. A small laugh escaped him. He really stayed again. Jungkook nodded. I told him to go home. Did you honestly think he would listen? The younger man chuckled. No, of course not. Namjoon placed the food on the table and sat beside the window. The morning air looked fresh outside. People walked through the hospital garden below. Some patients were taking slow walks with their families. Others simply sat together beneath the trees. Life continued moving. Peacefully, Namjoon's expression became thoughtful. Are you feeling today? Jungkook considered the question. Better. Physically, it was true. The exhaustion remained, but it no longer felt overwhelming. Mentally, however, things were more complicated. Healing invisible wounds took longer. Namjoon seemed to understand. He leaned back in his chair. You know, when I was younger, I thought leadership meant having all the answers. Jungkook looked at him. The leader smiled softly. I believed I had to solve everything alone. A brief silence followed. But eventually I learned that people don't expect perfection. His eyes drifted toward the morning sky. They only expect honesty. The words settled deep within Jungkook's heart. Honesty, such a simple thing. Yet perhaps the hardest thing he had ever practiced. For years, he had hidden behind strength because he believed strength made people feel safe. He never considered that honesty might do the same. Jimin slowly opened his eyes. The moment he realized everyone was awake, embarrassment appeared on his face. Why didn't anyone wake me up? Namjoon laughed. Because you looked exhausted. Jimin stretched his arms. I wasn't exhausted. You were snoring. I absolutely was not. Burst into laughter. A genuine, uncontrollable laugh, the kind that made his shoulders shake. Both older members looked at him. For a moment, nobody spoke. Because that sound, that real laughter, had been absent for far too long. Jimin smiled. There it is. Jungkook blinked. Actual smile. Room became quiet again. A warm kind of quiet. Jungkook lowered his head. Perhaps he really had been pretending for too long. The doctor arrived later that afternoon. After another examination, his expression seemed pleased. Your condition is improving steadily. Jimin immediately sat upright. So when can he go home? The doctor smiled. Soon. Single word brought relief to everyone. However, his expression grew serious afterward. But recovery doesn't end when you leave the hospital. Jungkook listened carefully. You need proper rest, regular sleep, no overworking, ignoring warning signs. Doctor looked directly at him, and most importantly, brief pause, no suffering alone. Sentence lingered in the room long after he left. The afternoon passed slowly. The others visited again. The atmosphere felt lighter now. The fear that had consumed everyone during the first days had gradually transformed into hope. Taehyung brought ridiculous snacks nobody asked for. Jin complained dramatically about hospital food. Hosok filled the room with endless energy. Even Yoongi, despite pretending not to worry, stayed longer than usual. Surrounded by familiar voices, Jungkook realized something important. He had never truly been alone, not once. The loneliness he felt had been created by the walls he built around himself, walls made from fear, from expectations, from the belief that vulnerability pushed people away. Yet the opposite had happened. The moment he allowed others to see his pain, they came closer. Evening eventually arrived. One by one, everyone left, until only Jimin remained once again. The city lights flickered outside. A gentle breeze moved through the slightly opened window. Jungkook looked toward his friend. "Hi, Young. I ask you something." Jimin turned his chair. "Anything." Younger man's expression grew serious. "What if this happens again?" The question carried genuine fear. Fear of returning to old habits, fear of losing himself once more, fear of disappointing everyone despite everything that had happened. Jimin understood immediately. He moved closer. Then he answered with complete certainty. "Then we'll face it together." No hesitation, no complicated advice, just a promise. Jungkook stared at him. "But what if I fail?" Jimin smiled. "Then fail." Younger man blinked. "Fail, Jungkook." His voice remained calm. "They get tired. They make mistakes. They fall apart sometimes." Older man's eyes softened. "That doesn't make them unworthy of love." The words struck somewhere deep. For so long, Jungkook had connected love with achievement, with being reliable, with always being strong. But perhaps real love had nothing to do with those things. Perhaps real love remained even when someone was broken. A comfortable silence followed. The night outside grew darker. Stars slowly appeared above the city. Jungkook closed his eyes. The fear inside him had not completely disappeared. The insecurities still existed. The pressure would not magically vanish overnight. But now, something was different. He no longer carried those burdens alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin healing. Jimin looked at him and smiled. "Get some sleep." Jungkook opened one eye. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" Jimin laughed quietly. "Where else would I be?" The answer brought unexpected comfort. Jungkook closed his eyes again. This time peace came naturally, not because every problem had been solved, but because he finally understood that being loved did not require pretending to be invincible. Sometimes, the strongest thing a person could do was simply trust someone enough to stay.